The cells stank of blood, damp stone, and rot. Ned Stark sat hunched against the cold wall of the black cells, his face pale and shadowed with days of torment. Outside the bars, the muffled chaos of King's Landing pulsed like a distant heartbeat. Execution loomed. His choices had narrowed to a blade or a lie. Varys visited with his usual quiet steps and cryptic words, whispering of mercy cloaked in submission. Say Joffrey is the true king. Bend the knee, live for your daughters. That was the offer. But Ned Stark-Lord of Winterfell, Warden of the North, had lived a life ruled by honor. And yet, it wasn't honor that gnawed at his gut in these final hours. It was a secret, a truth he had buried for 17 years. A truth about Jon Snow. He had never feared death, not really, but the thought of dying without writing the lie he'd told his best friend and his family that filled him with a cold he couldn't shake. He could still see her, Lyanna, pale and dying on that bloody bed in the Tower of Joy. "Promise me, Ned," she had whispered, cradling the child born of love and war. That promise had shaped his life ever since. But now, that promise threatened to die with him. And what would happen then? Jon would live and die as a Snow, hated by Catelyn, shunned by society. And worse, he might die fighting for a crown that should have been his. So when Varys returned with quill and parchment, asking if he would confess, Ned said something unexpected. "I need to write a letter," he murmured, "to my sister, to Catelyn, and to Jon." The spider raised a brow. "And what truth shall this letter carry?" Ned met his eyes, the last embers of a fading fire glowing within, the kind that changes kings. The ravens flew north the next morning, one to Winterfell, one to Castle Black, and one to Riverrun, where Catelyn lingered. The ink hadn't even dried when the guards came for him. Sir Ilyn Payne stood with his lifeless eyes and swinging greatsword. Sansa screamed. The crowd jeered. Joffrey grinned, like a boy pulling the wings off a fly. And then it happened, the sword fell. Ice drank deep. The king's hand rolled, but the letters had already taken flight. At Castle Black, Jon Snow stood alone, watching the snowfall on the wall when the raven came. Sam found him, clutching the scroll with trembling fingers. "It's from Lord Stark," Sam said, his voice hushed. Jon took the letter with a strange tightness in his chest. He hadn't heard from Ned since he left for King's Landing. As his eyes ran across the words, the wind seemed to still. "Jon, you are not my son. You are the son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen. I raised you as my own to protect you from Robert's wrath. Forgive me for not telling you sooner. I did it for love. Not just for your mother's, but for yours. You are not a bastard, Jon. You are a prince, a dragon and a wolf both." The parchment slipped from his fingers. Sam caught it. What does it say?" Jon stared blankly at the snow. "I'm not who I thought I was." In Winterfell, Maester Luwin read the second letter aloud to Robb and Catelyn. Robb's face drained of colour. Catelyn stood frozen. It was one thing to hate the boy she thought was her husband's mistake. It was another to learn he was the son of the man who started Robert's rebellion. How could Ned, lie to me for all these years? She asked, voice shaking. Robb couldn't answer. His mind swirled with fear. If Jon was a Targaryen, what did that make Robb's claim to the north? To Winterfell? Far across the sea, Daenerys Targaryen stood on the deck of a ship bound for Westeros, unaware that another Targaryen had just been born again in the snow. The news spread like wildfire, silent and explosive. At first, whispered in dark corners of Winterfell's halls, then, louder, around campfires and market squares across the north. Ned Stark's last truth had arrived not with trumpets or banners, but with ink and feathered wings. And yet it carried more weight than 1,000 swords. Jon remained at Castle Black, the letter clutched like a lifeline he didn't ask for. The words echoed in his skull day and night. He wandered the courtyards, snow crunching beneath his boots, unsure whether to scream or weep. Every glance from Sam was heavy with worry, every greeting from other brothers now layered with unease. Jon ... or should I call you? Prince Alliser Thorne sneered one morning. Jon didn't respond. He wasn't ready to believe it himself. He still looked like a bastard, still felt like one. I don't care what that letter says, Thorne went on, louder now, drawing eyes. Targaryen blood or no, you'll always be a snowflake bastard in this place. Ghost bared his teeth from the shadows. Jon kept walking. It wasn't the Night's Watch that would change because of this. It was the world outside the wall, the world Jon no longer belonged to, and yet now had some terrible claim over. At Winterfell, the North was fracturing. Robb tried to hide. It tried to act as if nothing had changed. But every lord who came through those gates asked the same question, only with different lips. Is it true? Is Jon Snow truly Rhaegar Targaryen's son? Robb's eyes never answered fast enough. Some, like Lord Manderley, whispered of prophecy, of dragons returning, of kings who come again. Others were colder. If a Targaryen walks among us, Roose Bolton murmured to Robb over wine, shouldn't we put him down before the South comes, claiming him? Robb barely swallowed the urge to draw steel, and Catelyn, she had retreated into herself, her face blank, like someone mourning a second time. She sat beside Ned's old chair in the great hall, the letter folded and unfolded again and again in her hands. He let me hate that boy, she whispered one night when Robb found her alone. Let me pour venom on him. And all the while, Jon wasn't his shame, he was ... his honor. Robb said nothing. What comfort could he offer? His father had died with a secret too big to bury, and Jon was now a threat. Not because he had asked to be, but because his blood declared it. In King's Landing, Cersei read the Raven with lips pressed tight. The message had arrived, as a curiosity, intercepted by her spies before it could be burned or dismissed. A Targaryen in the north, she said slowly, her mind already spinning. Littlefinger stood nearby, hands folded, expression unreadable. If it's true, he said softly, the boy's claim surpasses any Baratheon. She looked at him sharply. You speak as if he'll live long enough to make one. Petyr Baelish smiled thinly. I only mean, the game changes, your grace. If dragons are returning, it's wise to know which direction they're flying. Cersei turned her gaze back to the fire. Then we burn the boy before he learns how to fly. Back at Castle Black, the next raven came not from Winterfell, but from Dawn. The message was brief, signed by Prince Doran Martell. It offered no open allegiance, but one thing was clear. Someone had confirmed Jon's birth was lawful, Rhaegar, and Lyanna had married in secret, which meant Jon was not only he was the Targaryen, the rightful heir. Jon sat alone in the library that night, the weight of it crushing. He wasn't ready for power. He didn't want it. I've taken the black, he told Maester Aemon, who listened in silence. I have no claim. I made a vow. Aemon chuckled, a dry rasp from a mouth that had lived too long. And yet, he said, blind eyes gazing somewhere distant. The blood in your veins does not care for vows. It moves kingdoms. Jon looked away. Then let the kingdoms burn. But outside the wall, things were shifting. The wildlings whispered of strange lights in the sky. The dead stirred beneath frozen soil. And somewhere in the darkness, the White Walkers marched. And now, the one destined to face them carried a crown he never wanted. Winter's breath hung heavier over the wall as days passed, each colder than the last. But inside Castle Black, Jon Snow's world felt warmer, hotter, even like a forge where identity melted and reshaped itself. The name Snow had always been a burden, now it was a lie. He was Jon Targaryen, the last living son of the dragon's blood, and somehow that felt even heavier. Maester Aemon had become his closest confidant, not just for his wisdom, but for what they blood. Jon visited him more often now, seeking comfort, clarity, maybe even denial. But Aemon offered no illusions. "I gave up a crown once," the old man rasped, cradling a steaming cup in both hands. "You may have to fight for yours." "I don't want it," Jon replied, frustrated. Aemon smiled, thin and hollow. "Which makes you more fit for it than most." Still, the more Jon tried to distance himself from the truth, the more it came clawing back. Ravens continued to fly in, each one laced with implications. Messages from lords curious, worried, or vengeful. The Watch began to look at him differently, some with awe, some with suspicion. When a group of new recruits arrived and bowed to him by instinct, Jon barked at them. "Don't do that again. I'm no prince here." But the moment was burned into every eye. Even Seer, Jeor Mormont gruff and focused, watched him longer these days. "You've stirred the world outside," he warned. "There's whispers that the Night's Watch harbors a king. If that brings politics to this wall, you'll have no allies here. Not even me." Jon nodded stiffly. "I made my vows, Lord Commander. And vows can be broken," Mormont said. "Especially by kings and bastards alike." Robb Stark's grip on his bannermen grew shakier. Though many still swore loyalty to the young wolf, some now hesitated. Lord Karstark questioned openly whether Jon's blood made him a better candidate to lead the North against the Lannisters. Even Lady Mage Mormont sent word, blunt and sharp as her sword. "If the true dragon flies from the wall, I will answer its roar." Robb punched the war table hard enough to splinter it. "How can they say that? Jon doesn't want this. He took the Black, but the North didn't listen to oaths. It listened to blood, and Jon had Rhaegar's and Lyanna's in him. A song of ice and fire, born in secret, now exposed like a naked blade. The worst of it came when Roose Bolton requested a private audience. "Your father was a man of honor," Bolton said smoothly, seated across from Robb. "But in revealing the truth, he may have doomed your rule. The South already plots. If Jon is the rightful heir, well, kings have been murdered for less." Robb narrowed his eyes. "If you're suggesting I raise a hand against my own brother—" "I suggest nothing," Bolton interrupted. "I only observe. Winter is coming, and a kingdom cannot survive divided loyalties. Be wary, Your Grace. The North remembers. But it also adapts." Robb's silence lingered long after Bolton left. In King's Landing, the small council met under tense candlelight. Varys read the latest missive from the wall aloud. It confirmed not only Jon's true parentage, but his refusal so far to abandon the Watch. "Perhaps he's more honorable than wise," Grand Maester Pycelle grunted. "Or he's biding time," Baelish said, tapping his fingers. "Even the most humble dragon must stretch its wings one day." Cersei stood, Then we clip them now. She turned to her cousin, Sir Lancel. Send assassins to the wall, quiet ones. If the North won't deal with their bastard king, we will. Varys tilted his head. The optics, your grace, too. Murder a man sworn to celibacy and defense of the realm. Cersei's eyes flashed. He's a Targaryen. Optics be damned. Meanwhile, far across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen had just begun her voyage to Westeros. She stood beside her dragons, wind in her hair, feeling the pull of destiny. But the news from Westeros finally reached her Jon Snow, her nephew, a true-born male heir. She stared at the letter, her face blank. He has no army, Jorah said quickly. No ships. He's just a name. But names are powerful, Dany said quietly, especially when they belong to kings. She turned to the sea. If he's who they say he is, then he may have to kneel or burn. Back at Castle Black, Jon was summoned to Lord Mormont's chambers. They've sent riders from Winterfell, Mormont said. Robb Stark wants to speak with you, privately. Jon's heart sank. What for? He asked, though the answer was already crawling in his mind. Because the world's changed, Mormont said gravely. And you, Jon, ... you changed it. Jon rode south, under heavy skies. He had never felt so torn, not even when he first left Winterfell. Now he was leaving again, but not as Ned Stark's bastard son. He was leaving as a man with dragon's blood in his veins, with a crown hovering over his head like a ghost. Ghost ran beside him, silent as ever. His presence was comforting, but not enough to calm the storm inside Jon. He wasn't ready to see Robb not as a prince, not as a potential threat. And yet, that's what this meeting was about. No one had said the words aloud, but Jon wasn't naive. When kings summoned, it wasn't to reminisce. He reached Winterfell under grey skies and frost-bitten winds. It felt smaller now, colder, different. Robb met him in the Godswood. He stood by the heart tree, hands behind his back. His face was hard, older than his years. Jon dismounted and approached, unsure what to say. Jon, Robb's voice was quiet, but heavy. Your Grace, Jon replied stiffly. Robb flinched, just a little. Don't call me that. Not here. Jon studied his brother No, cousin, and realized they both looked like men aged by burdens they never asked for. I didn't ask for this, Jon said. Neither did I, Robb replied. But here we are. They were silent for a long time. Wind hissed through the trees. I never hated you, Robb finally said, even when Mother did. I thought of you as my brother, always. Jon looked down. But I'm not. No, Robb admitted. You're not, and that's the problem. Jon tensed. If you think I want your throne, Robb, I don't think that, Robb cut in, but others do. Karstark, Mormont, even some of the Umbers. They think your blood gives you a better claim than mine. Jon exhaled. Then tell them. They're fools. I took the black. My life belongs to the wall. Robb stepped closer. You think vows matter to lords hungry for power? The South will come for you, Jon. Cersei's probably already planning it. And the North might follow you if they think you're a better chance. I don't want their loyalty. Robb's voice hardened. That doesn't matter. What matters is perception. And right now, you're a threat to my crown. Jon's hands clenched. So what? You called me here to ask me to disappear. Robb stared at him. No, I called you here to ask you something harder. Jon frowned. What? Robb swallowed. Stay, fight with me, publicly. Be seen as my brother again. Show them that your blood doesn't matter more than our bond." Jon was stunned. "I can't be king of the North," Robb continued, "if my own brother's shadow hangs over. Every council, I need you with me, not above me, not beside me, with me." Jon looked at him for a long moment, and then he nodded. "All right, I'll stand by you. Not as a prince, just ... Jon." A smile flickered across Robb's lips for the first time in weeks. But neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows. A raven-haired man with sharp eyes and quiet feet. Petyr Baelish had heard. Enough. In King's Landing, Cersei read the latest Raven and cursed. "They're uniting," she hissed. "Those Stark boys are cleverer than I thought." Tywin Lannister folded his hands calmly. "Then we divide them again. If the North loves their bastard prince, we make him less lovable." Cersei blinked. How Tywin stood. "We leak that Jon is Rhaegar's son, yes, but not born of marriage. We turn him into a true bastard. That removes his claim and shames his name. And if he protests," she asked. Tywin's eyes gleamed. "Let him. The more he speaks of dragons and thrones, the more the Watch turns against him. Then ... we wait for him to slip." Cersei smiled. But the real threat wasn't in the North or the South. Beyond the wall, the dead marched silent, tireless, cold. Their king rode a pale horse, his blue eyes locked on a future only he could see. And in the firelit caves beneath Dragonstone, Melisandre stared into the flames and gasped. "The prince is awake," she whispered, "and winter will test him." The feast at Winterfell was meant to be a show of unity. Robb and Jon sat side by side, drinking with bannermen, laughing with old friends, sharing stories of their youth. But the air was tight with false cheer. Every lord in the room had questions. Behind their smiles, doubts behind their toasts. Jon could feel the eyes on him, Karstark, watching with narrowed suspicion. Great Jon, Umber, half drunk and always loud. Lady Mormont, quiet but calculating. Even the common folk whispered, "That's the one, the Dragon Prince. ... Double quotes. He hated it. All of it. He wasn't a prince. He wasn't a king. He was a brother of the Night's Watch. But his name, his blood had other plans." Later that night, as the fires died and the guests scattered to their chambers, Jon stood alone at the balcony of Winterfell's tower, staring at the snow. Robb joined him, 2 cups in hand. "You handled yourself well," Robb said, offering one. "I don't want this attention," Jon muttered, not taking the cup. "It poisons everything." Robb leaned against the stone. "Tell me about it." They shared a quiet moment, remembering better days. Days with wooden swords and snowball wars. Days before crowns and daggers in the dark. Robb glanced at him. "Do you ever wonder what it would have been like if Father told us both the truth earlier, before all of this?" Jon nodded. "Every day." Robb sighed. "I would have still loved you like a brother. I hope you know that." "I do," Jon said softly. It should have been a healing moment. But across the castle, a raven landed, black wings, dark purpose. At Castle Black, Sir Gior Mormont read the Lannister message with his jaw set. They had done it. Cersei's scheme was in motion. Word was spreading fast that Jon Snow, now publicly Jon Targaryen, was not a true-born child of Rhaegar and Lyanna, but a bastard. The message painted Jon as a false prince, a danger to unity, a rebel in black, a traitor in dragons. "Skin, they're turning you into a threat," Maester Aemon said, folding the message. I never asked for this, Jon growled. And yet it comes, just as it came for Rager, and for your father. Jon gritted his teeth. Ned Stark was my father. Aemon nodded slowly. In all the ways that mattered, yes. But blood has memory, Jon, and your enemies will make you wear it. A second raven arrived hours later from the east. This one bore the mark of House Targaryen, a blood-red seal. Jon opened it with shaking hands. It was a message from Daenerys. To Jon Targaryen, word of your identity has reached me. If the world believes it, we must address it together. I invite you to Dragonstone. Refuse, and you remain a pawn. Accept, and perhaps we find truth or alliance. Daenerys Stormborn, Queen of the Andals and Mother of Dragons, Robb read the message in silence. She wants you to bend the knee, he said darkly. No, Jon replied. She wants to measure me. You go to her, and the North may never trust you again. Jon looked him in the eye. If I don't go, the South will never trust you. It was true. If the two Targaryens stood apart, they'd be used against each other by every whispering noble. If they stood together, well, that was another kind of danger. I'm not going to swear loyalty, Jon said. I'm going to see who she really is. Robb nodded slowly. Then take someone with you. Someone you trust. Jon already knew who. Arya Stark found him in the stables the next morning. You're leaving again, she said flatly. Jon paused, then nodded. It's not for long. She didn't believe him. You're going to her, aren't you? The Dragon Queen. I have to. Arya looked at him, her eyes older than her face. Just don't forget who you are when she starts calling you Prince. Jon smiled faintly. I'm still Jon Snow. No, she whispered. You're not. Not anymore. As Jon rode south, he couldn't shake the feeling that the next time he returned to Winterfell, everything would be different. That the walls would feel foreign. That the snow would be colder. And somewhere in the skies ahead, wings were stirring. Dragons, destiny, and perhaps war. The sea groaned under the weight of history as Jon's ship neared Dragonstone. Winds howled like restless ghosts, and salt clung to the air, thick with the scent of coming change. Jon stood at the prow, his black cloak whipping behind him, ghost silent at his side. Beside him, Seer Davos Seaworth gripped the railing tightly. You sure about this, lad? Davos asked. She's not known for her mercy. Jon's gaze was fixed ahead. Neither is Winter. As the black stone cliffs of Dragonstone rose into view, shadowed by low-hanging clouds, Jon felt a strange pull, part dread, part curiosity. Here waited Daenerys Targaryen, his blood and his rival, the mother of dragons, the breaker of chains, and possibly the queen who might decide whether he lived or died. He was greeted by Tyrion Lannister. The gates. The two men exchanged nodded acquaintances from the wall, now meeting again under vastly different titles. You've changed, Tyrion said. Less brooding, more ... princely. Jon didn't smile. I've had practice, Tyrion. Led them through the halls of Dragonstone, the walls lined with obsidian, lit by fire. And then, at the top of the stairs, stood Daenerys. She was regal, cloaked in black and red, silver hair flowing like silk. Behind her, Drogon watched with slit eyes. The room seemed to hold its breath. Jon Targaryen, she said, or Snow, depending on whose truth you accept. Jon bowed stiffly. Your Grace, you know why you're here. He nodded. You want to see if I'm a threat. She walked slowly toward him. "And are you?" "No," Jon said. "Not to you, not unless you want me to be." Daenerys studied him, searching for signs of ambition, of deceit. But all she saw was weariness, and something else resolve. "You're loyal to the North. I'm loyal to what's right and what's coming." He told her about the White Walkers, about the Night King, about the army of the dead. At first, she listened with polite disbelief, but when Davos added the story of Hardhome and the long night, her face darkened. "You expect me to abandon my claim to the throne because of tales of walking corpses?" she asked. "No," Jon said. "I expect you to help us fight them, and if we survive, we can talk about thrones." She turned to Tyrion, who gave a subtle nod. Something in Jon's tone had struck truth. "I'll consider it," she said finally. But that was only the beginning. As Jon stayed at Dragonstone, tensions rose across Westeros. Word of his visit reached Winterfland. Robb's court erupted in division. Some lords saw it as betrayal. Others saw it as diplomacy. Roose Bolton used it as fuel. "He kneels in secret," he whispered to the cast. "Soon he'll return with dragons and demand our fealty." Robb wrote a letter stern, simple and pained. "You are my brother, but you owe the North your loyalty. Do not lose yourself in her fire." Jon read it in silence, then burned it, not out of anger, but necessity. Words were ashes when winter came. In King's Landing, Cersei's fury grew. "So he goes crawling to her." She spat. "Let them marry. Let the dragon spawn breed. It will make their deaths easier." She summoned Qyburn. "Send word to Essos. I want spies in her court. If Jon Snow is becoming Jon the King, I want him dead before he returns to the North." But something else stirred beneath Dragonstone. One night, Jon walked the tunnels alone. He found Daenerys by the Dragonglass caves, tracing the carvings on the wall, ancient figures fighting white-eyed monsters. "The first men fought them," she murmured, "together with the children of the forest." Jon stepped beside her. "And they won, for a time," she said, "but history repeats." Their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them, tension, curiosity, fate. "You don't want to be king," she said softly. "No," Jon answered, "but I'll become one if it means saving my people." She stepped closer. "Then maybe we both have to become more than what we are." But peace wasn't meant to last. That night, a raven came. Winterfell was burning.